So today I'm going to take you through the complete strip down of a Nitro engine. This is obviously a car engine because it's got the flywheel on there. Because if you've never done one before, I've watched a few videos online and they seem to gloss over the how do you get the sleeve out and also how do you get the bearings out. So I've loosened off the carburetor already, so we'll just pull that out and put that to the side. First thing to do is take off the back plate. Now, it's always important to have a very good Allen key. This is one that I've just replaced the shaft on recently because the other one was getting a bit worn. It's not so bad with the back plate ones, because if one happens to slip or the screw's not very good, you can get a pair of small vice grips onto the head and loosen the bolt there. But the head ones are completely different because they're all sunken in, and if they slip, then you're in big trouble. You've got to try and drill the head out without damaging, drill the head out of the bolt without damaging the actual head, which I've had to do on occasion. I'll just take these out. I have actually loosened these off beforehand. Okay, then you just twist the head off. Now you can see that started to raise there, the sleeve's quite loose there, but if it's tight and doesn't want to come out, because you can't use metal in there because you'll damage the sleeve or the piston. So the best thing to use is a cable tie, because that's plastic. You put the head down into the exhaust port and just hold that there, and with the flywheel on, you can just hold that there, and it just sits in enough that it doesn't hit the crankcase, and just pushes, as you turn, it just pushes the sleeve out. And there you go, it comes out. So that's the exhaust port there. So the cable tie was just sitting in there like that, and then you use the piston just to push it out. So that's how you get the sleeves out. Now we'll take the back plate off. As you can see, a lot of gum in there. So I'll be replacing the bearings as well. Even though they're moving quite easily, I always like to replace the bearings. So with this, just have that near the top and just, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The gum's probably holding that a little bit. And we'll just piece of wood. It's almost off. There we go, that's come off there now. So there's the piston out. You can see that's a little bit tight there. That should be flopping around quite easily. So you can and see all the old castor oil probably in there. So what I normally do is I'll sit that there and I'll just fill that with a bit of oil and just let it sit for a while, and that tends to loosen them up. but I'll soak everything in methylated spirits, and that gets rid of most of the dirt, and you just use a small brush to brush it all. Okay, so we get that pin out there. So I've just been down to the shed and loosened off the flywheel. You use these soft jaws on the vise. They're just plastic, and you just lock the flywheel up in the vise, and then I just use one of these where you can get that just goes onto the nut, and you can get a fair bit of leverage there, because sometimes they're very, very tight. Okay, so we'll get the little drive washer and that off, and then we'll just knock the crank out using a soft mallet. You can see that really doesn't want to go there. Just have to use that on there. There's the crank out. I'll give that I'll clean that up, give that a good polish through there as well with the little buffer I've got on the Dremel, and that'll be as good as new. Now, with the bearings, as you can see through there, with the front bearing, you can just get a soft, I just use a rod of aluminium, and you can just knock the front bearing out. But the back bearing, this one actually, the crankcase splits, but you don't need to split the crankcase. The back bearing, how do you get that out? Because that's exactly the same size as the rest of it. So you've got nothing to knock on. So what you do is I've turned the oven on, and you put this in the oven, and the aluminium heats up faster than the steel of the bearing. And then you just turn around the same as when I did the piston, and you just give it a good whack, and the bearing will drop out, which I will show you shortly once I've warmed this up. Okay, so I've had this sitting in the oven at about 200 degrees for 5 minutes. Always use an oven mitt because they're red hot. And then you just give that a definite knock. Oop, there all the bearings went. And that might need a bit more. No, there it is. There's the bearing out. So that's going to be hot for a while. Now, with these new bearings, you can see that's the old bearing, that's quite hot, and then that's the front bearing, which I just put a rod down through and just had it locked up in the vise with the soft jaws, again because the metal vise jaws will mark the aluminium otherwise. Okay, now with these have got a steel cover both sides, whereas you only need it on one side for the front bearing. So I just use a small screwdriver, and you just dig it in a couple of times and just pop that seal out. That way it can get lubricated by the oil. There you go. That is in the fuel. Now these old engines were only designed to run on a maximum of about 10% nitro. So this one, you need to dig the seals out both sides. When I was 13 and racing, I used to run 5% nitro, and what I used to call the crazy guys, they used to run at 8 or 10% nitro. None of this 20, 30, 40% nitro that the engines run on nowadays. So as you can see, those, you know, the new bearings, they're lovely. And these old ones will just go in the bin. Now I've put everything into a old takeaway container, and I'll fill that with methylated spirits, put the lid on, and just let that soak for a day or two, and then just clean it all up. And as I say, I'll polish the crank and stuff. The sleeve generally just needs a wipe out. The piston, as I say, once it's cleaned, I'll just sit it up like that, fill the piston with oil and just let that sit to loosen up the con rod. As you can see with that drive wheel, someone's used vice grips on there instead of locking the flywheel up in the vice with the soft jaws and doing the nut up. They've put multi-grips or vice grips on there. You can see all the marks. But I can put that in the lathe, and I'll just run the lathe tool very gently across there and get rid of all those. I just put a bolt through here, nut, and that, you know, sits out so you can lock it up in the lathe jaws. Now with the this is a slide carburetor. Now these just turn. There's nothing that stops that going, and it just, you know, that's how it goes up, and, you know, that's idle, that's full. So we'll just pop the seal off there. The dust seal, that comes out. When you used to buy a new OS engine, you used to get 2 OS spanners and a Allen key as well. I'll just pop that out there, and then that's your idle screw there. And then there's your other needle. Wind that out. Once these needles are out, there's no seals or anything in there, because all the seals are on there, and you just give that a bit of a wipe with the cloth, get the O-ring off. And then that can just get soaked as well. Make sure everything's not, you know, everything's clean. I'll put that in the takeaway container as well. And then once I've cleaned it up, I'll show you the assembly.